Okay, our final video here might end up being a little bit longer than the other ones we've recorded recently because we need to discuss how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Again, our steps are going to involve finding the value of the discriminant. Then we will plug a, b, and the discriminant into the quadratic formula, and then we will finish solving. So we need to make sure that it's in the correct format. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Both of these first two examples are, so we won't have to worry about rearranging. We then find the value of the discriminant, just like we did in the previous video. So we have a is 7, b is -2, c is -5. We find the value of the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. That would be -2 squared minus 4 times 7 times -5, which is 4 plus 140. So the value of the discriminant is 144. So next we're going to go to the actual quadratic formula, which again, it would be helpful to memorize, but it's really not necessary. It's in your notes. It is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, the only three things we need to plug in here are the opposite of b, which is 2, plus or minus the square root of the value we found before, the discriminant, 144, over 2 times a, which is 7. So x is going to be equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 144 is 12. 2 times 7 is 14. Which means that we have two x values here. X is either 2 plus 12 divided by 14, or x is 2 minus 12 divided by 14. We're splitting up that plus and minus just like we did with quadratic formula. So our first number there, 2 plus 12 is 14, divided by 14 means that our first answer is x equals 1. Our second answer is 2 minus 12, which is -10, over 14, which reduces to -5 over 7. Let's do another example. Once again, we're already set to go. It's in the right format, so we simply have that equals 0, so we're ready to start solving. We find the discriminant first. A is 1, b is 8, c is 16. b squared minus 4ac is 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16. That is 64 minus 64, meaning that the value of the discriminant is 0. We then turn our attention to the quadratic formula, -b plus or minus the square root of that discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. b is 8, so -b is -8, plus or minus the square root of the discriminant, which we just established, is 0. Pen is misbehaving. There it goes. Over 2 times a, which is 1. Notice that when the discriminant is 0, what ends up happening is that the plus or minus drops out, because whether we add 0 or subtract 0, it's still -8. So we end up with one solution, x equals -8 over 2, meaning that x equals -4. Again, this is known as a double root because it was the result of both -8 plus the square root of 0 and -8 minus the square root of 0. So it happens twice. All right, let's do some more. Okay, these are not in the proper format, so our first step is to put them in the proper format. So for c, we're going to need to subtract 5x from each side and subtract 4 from each side, which would cancel these two terms out and would get us written in ax squared plus bx plus c format, which would be 4x squared minus 12x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, this side is now 0 because everything's gone. We then need to pull our a just like we did on the previous page. So a is 4, b is -12, and c is -4. We are going to find the value of the discriminant. B squared minus 4ac is -12 squared minus 4 times 4 times -4. That would be 144 plus 64. So b squared minus 4ac is going to equal 208. We then turn our attention to the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant over 2a. That would be the opposite of b would be positive 12 plus or minus the square root of 208 over 2 times 4. Simplify that down would be 12 plus or minus the square root of 208. Put it in the calculator, and we find out that that is 4 root 13, because 208 is 16 times 13, and the square root of 16 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Now, if you notice, all three of those numbers are divisible by 4. So what happens is we end up factoring out a 4 from the numerator, and then we reduce that fraction, giving us x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Our answer will not get any better than that. So here, if you want to think about this way, all three numbers are divisible by 4, so we can divide all three numbers by 4, which would give us 12 divided by 4 is 3, 4 root 13 divided by 4 is root 13, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Let's do another one. On letter D, we need to move the 10 so that we're in the right format. That would give us the equation x squared minus 2x minus 10 equals 0. Okay, so that's in the right format. A is 1, B is negative 2, C is negative 10. We do the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. That'd be negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 10, or 4 plus 40. So the value of the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is 44. Once again, they take that and we plug it in along with b and a into the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2a. So the opposite of b would be positive 2 plus or minus the square root of 44 over 2 times 1. So x is 2 plus or minus the square root of 44 is 2 root 11 over 2 times 1, which is 2. Again, we have a 2 in all three of those numbers. So what's really happening is we're factoring that 2 out and then reducing. These both become 1s, which makes this not necessary. And we have 1 plus or minus the square root of 11 for our final answer. Thank you for your time and attention. Remember that you have a test on Tuesday over solving quadratics.